Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to our first of the 4 leadership hustles plus HR in 2021. Today's topic is going to be from the daily grind to emotional exhaustion. After we're all experiencing a year of disruption, uncertainty, and everything that came along with it, I'm sure we're all at different times have been starting to feel a little overwhelmed. And we all know that in 2020 has changed a lot of our lives. It can be anything from a personal perspective to a professional, from where we work today versus where we used to, how often we see people or don't see people. And as we continue to go into 21, and we're already, oh my goodness, we're already in March, the end of March almost, now that I'm thinking about it. We're already done with the first quarter almost. And it's starting to still, I think, really have a hold on some people. And we wanted to really be able to bring in some helpful information that you can take back with you, and really look at how are you doing, first of all. Everyone, most everyone on this particular meeting is probably somewhere in that human resources where you're responsible for the health and the well-being of the people. And we do know that in order for you to take care of others, we need to have you first take care of yourself. So first and most part, making sure you're kind of observing how are you doing, but then what are we doing with our employees at work? So with that, we were, able to get a couple of panelists that are really going to be helpful. And I'm really excited to listen to some of the insights they're going to share with us. One thing we're doing a little different this year is we've added in a little time where we're going to do a breakout groups, which is why we're on meetings versus a webinar. And we're going to allow the participants to get into small groups and have some conversations towards the end, and then come back and share with us maybe a takeaway, and if you had an additional question for our panelists. So making it a little more engaged. So a couple housekeeping things, and then we will get right down to really what we're all here for. So first, I'm Michelle from Revela, and I'll be the moderator for today. So as you guys are all on, it looks like, from what I can tell, just keep your speakers off for the moment. Make sure you've just got your beverage of choice. Speaker view is going to be the best view. And if you can, leave your cameras on, but if you don't want to, that's fine as well. Yesterday, you received a handout, and we have created that handout to provide you some information on our panelists, as well as a place to kind of capture your best ideas. And when you're working in your small groups, capture any of your key takeaways that maybe you are able to pull from those discussions as well. Courtney from Revela is going to be working in our chat. So you're going to notice she's going to be posting things. So she's got a welcome in there. And then she also has right now a link to that handout. If you don't have it handy, you could pop it up real quick right now and simply download it. And she will be just, as we are having discussions, posting some things in that chat for you from time to time. We are recording today's session, and after this evening, we will get it uploaded on YouTube, and we'll send that out in an email. So if it's something that you want to rewatch or you want to share with someone that you think it would be helpful, please do. And then I would say, as we move forward, the next 80 minutes, we're really going to kind of set some times set an opportunity where the people on our panel are going to be able to help us look and recognize signs of burnout, think about ways we can create a space where people feel safe, and also identify some strategies that we can implement to reduce stress in our workplace and maybe at our home as well. So I want to get to our panel. We have got Andrea, Chris, and Robin. And with the three, what we'll do is I'll call on each one of them. But if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself, and in regards to where, what are you going to do, and also what company you're with, and then give us one fun fact that people might not know about yourself as well. So I will start with Robin.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Robin Burnett, and I'm coming to you today from Methodist Best Care Employee Assistance Program, where we partner with organizations locally and nationally to provide mental health services for their employees. So we not only provide that organizational support to those HR folks, wellness folks, but then also providing those services to the frontline employees and leadership. I have a background, I'm a licensed mental health practitioner by trade. I have a background in private practice, and I also have experience in acute care in a hospital setting. And then the past 8 years previously from joining Best Care, which I've been here for about 3 years now, was serving individuals with severe mental illness, and I was in management there at an organization called Community Alliance here locally. So I'm happy to be here today. Fun fact about me, I didn't prepare something. I would say something fun is that not half, but close to half of my family lives in Anchorage, Alaska. So my dad is from there, so I get the privilege and joy to go and visit them every so often, and it's an amazing place to visit if you haven't gone before.
That is a great fact. And I would imagine that you have a reason to have to go, but it's got to be beautiful too at the same time. Well, welcome, Robin. We were so excited that you were able to join us today. And then we've got Chris. I'll go ahead and let you go.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Chris Langlois. I'm currently the fire chief for the town of Leland Fire and Rescue Department, which is in North Carolina. We're just outside of Wilmington, right on the coast, about 20 minutes from the beach. I have been in the fire service for about 33 years. I started as a volunteer. I'm originally from South Louisiana and eventually moved to Nebraska, probably about 25 years ago. And I spent the last 20 years before getting here with the Omaha Fire Department, moving my way up through the ranks from firefighter, paramedic, captain, and then eventually battalion chief. And I spent a few years there before I retired as battalion chief. My last assignment there was as the chief of the safety division, which is kind of where I started to get a lot of involvement in the mental health aspects as far as safety and wellness for our personnel. I don't have any formal behavioral health or mental health training or knowledge, but my division supported the people that did and the programs that we were doing for the firefighters there, which involved a lot of PTSD, peer support, firefighter suicide prevention training, and things like that. So it's one of the things that I'm trying to do here. I've only been here in Leland for about 7 months now, but we've already designated somebody here to head up kind of our behavioral health program, and we're working on getting that started here. So I guess one fun fact about me is I'm a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. And so the not having concerts for the last year and a half or so has been killing me. So we're looking forward to when I can go and see Jimmy Buffett or any live music in the future. So thanks for having me.
Yes, well, and thank you for joining us, Chris. I was glad we had developed a relationship and knew each other years before this. So you were one of the first people that came into mind in regards to when we think about trauma and everything that goes along with your line of work. And, I'm also jealous in regards to where you live. So, and you'll have a lot of live music there, I promise. I know when I lived down in the South Carolina, there was live music all the time once we get through this. So, and then we've got Andrea Fredrickson from Revela.
So thanks for everybody for showing up. I'm Andrea with Revela. I'm with the team here. I have had years of work with people who have mental illness, mental retardation. That's a place where my family built their first businesses in that. So worked at the state of Nebraska, have been in multiple companies across the country, did a lot of development with that group. But what I bring today is probably more about how do we help create cultures where people feel not only physically safe, but mentally safe. And so there's a little bit of psychological safety, but there's a little bit more to it than that as it relates to what's going on today. So I won't talk too much, but just let you know, I guess my fun fact is I'm born on my parents' first wedding anniversary. I don't know if that's the greatest gift in the world, but I'm here to remind them every year about it. So let's get started on the panel.
All right. Well, and real quick, I don't want to forget, we have Aaron and Sarah from Haram with us. And so you'll see them and some of you will be lucky to have them in your breakout group as well. So I want to make sure welcome both of them, and we're glad that they're able to join us as well. And you'll find that when we do the breakouts, you're going to get a person from one of us 6 that is going to be with y'all. So, well, let's go ahead and get started. And Robin, I was going to start with you first. I wanted to ask you, as we navigate through the pandemic, when you're thinking about working with, because you're working with a lot of different clients, right? What keeps you up at night, and how have you pulled yourself through?
Well, pretty early on in the pandemic, I started going out and giving presentations saying, you're much more likely to be affected on an emotional level than a physical level from this pandemic. And I was saying that early on, and I wasn't alone with other mental health professionals. In fact, researchers with way more background than I did had predicted this to happen. So now we're starting to see that toll. Early on in the pandemic, especially in those first 3 to 6 months, we really saw people focusing on their priorities. You know, you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I want to make sure my housing is in place. I want to make sure I have food in the fridge. Many parents began working from home and doing homeschooling with their kids. I was one of them. I pulled my kids from daycare because I had that fear, unknown. So I started working from home with 2 toddlers. So taking care of my emotional and mental health needs weren't a top priority. And that we saw that with most of our employer groups as well. But now we're starting to see the repercussions of that. And we're seeing an increase with mental health, people seeking mental health services. But I would say that the thing that keeps me up at night, and I would say this for most of my colleagues, and what we've seen with the toll in the last year, predominantly in the last couple of months, is a great increase in suicide. We didn't really see it spike early on, although there was concern based on what researchers were saying, but we're starting to see that now. And it's incredibly disheartening. It's sad. We get HR professionals that will call us crying because they've received this news of somebody that they've been very close with. And I would say that's the biggest thing, and why it really is so important for me and what the work that we do to combat workplace distress and do whatever we can that's in our power, of course, from a workplace setting to make sure that our folks are doing okay.
Have you identified something that you do for yourself to help you kind of just manage or work through some of the thoughts maybe, or the fears that you have?
For me personally, I have to constantly remind myself that I'm doing everything that I can to help assist those that need resources. Of course, we can always do better, and I always seek to learn and understand those extra resources or those extra things I could be providing. But at the end of the day, we have to rest our hat on knowing that we're doing the best that we can. So I think that, and then I also think since early on in the pandemic, I've really focused on my job, and my career has always been my baby per se. And it's really helped me focus on what is most important, that truly is my babies, at home. And so that's put things in perspective for me. The first and foremost, and what we see with our the employees that we serve, and when they're distracted and they're not performing to their highest potential, it's because predominantly it's something in their personal lives. It's their marriage, it's their relationships. So we need to really foster and support that. It's the things that really is the most important are our personal lives and the people we care about the most. So focusing on those priorities really help me to stay grounded and continue to plug along and push forward.
Yeah, no, I can relate. That's good. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, I know with your background, a little different, but a lot of experiences. And when you think about mental health in the workplace, what are some things that you've learned through your years of working with a variety of individuals? What are some things that you've learned that you can share with our audience?
Probably the most important thing I can share is something that Andrea mentioned a few minutes ago, is creating a safe environment. Especially in the fire service, because we're type A people. In the past, years in the past, before we started to understand how our job and the things that we do every day and the things that we see every day affect us and affect our mental health, a lot of times it was looked at, if you felt like you were stressed, if you were feeling like you were having symptoms of PTSD, those types of things, you didn't show it because it was looked at as a weakness. Generally in the fire service in years past, you would have just been told to, suck it up. So creating that safe environment where somebody can ask for help, I think is going to be really important. One of the things that we talked about a lot in my position in Omaha, when we started doing some of the firefighter suicide prevention classes for our personnel, which we didn't even realize in the fire service nationwide that suicide for firefighters, paramedics, EMTs was an epidemic until we actually started tracking the data and started relating the suicides back to what they're experiencing, what they're seeing every day, and that cumulative stress. It's not always one incident that causes it. But one thing we learned, and we started stressing to everybody to create that environment that where it's safe for somebody to come out and ask for help, is there's a lot of folks in the fire department that still to this day are not real true believers that PTSD exists, or hey, we should just be able to deal with it. And we had to stress to everybody, there may be somebody sitting right next to you that wants to reach out and ask for help. And if you, or especially a supervisor, says, I really don't believe in this, the stress, I don't believe in PTSD, I don't believe that it affects you, you might have just shut somebody down from reaching out and asking for help. So I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of this that anybody can do in any workplace is just create that environment where it's okay to ask for help. Some people may be just looking for an opportunity to involve somebody and to just talk to them, and we don't want to shut them out or shut them down before they even have a chance to ask for help. So that's one of the huge things, is just creating that environment where it's a safe space for somebody to ask for help.
Well, and Chris, you kind of honed in on the, if someone who's managing a group doesn't believe in it, it's that negative ripple effect, right? So when we talk with organizations, especially if it's about the culture, their environment, it's top down, because people know right away, if someone at a high level in the organization doesn't really follow, doesn't believe, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid, whatever you want to use for that, they pick it up. And all the efforts from everyone else to create that safe space can sometimes not really work. And it's not because they're not doing a good job, but it can be maybe that one person who is really holding everyone else back, right? And the importance of finding the right mindset for your managers, and that belief in their people, and really the empathy and caring. As you were talking, I was just kind of thinking about all those things. So good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I think it's, I know when you and I talked, I was a little surprised. I mean, well, not surprised, but it's the amount of time it took to really recognize, everything that was going on, and then to actually do something about it. So I'm glad that you guys have it sounds like some really cool things in place, and it sounds like you're getting that rolling out where you're at now at the new location. I know, Andrew, when we were originally talking about what's our topic for March, you had shared a story with me, and it involved, kind of wrapped around over the last 6-8 months, some things that you learned about mental health, but also personally. Can you share with our group, our audience, some things that we talked about?
So before I go into this story, I consider myself a fairly strong person. And sometimes when I tell this story, I start getting teary. So hang with me. Here's what's going on. But most of you know Simon Sinek. He's a speaker, author, biologist, leader, speaker. He's got a lot of things. And I remember seeing him last summer in a couple of webinars, and just looking at him and going, oh my gosh, he just looks rough. Poor guy. It's just not, he doesn't look like he's doing really well, right? So in January, I was watching an interview where a CEO was interviewing Simon specifically, and the topic came up about this trauma, and that COVID really is a trauma. It's just a horrible thing that's happening to people, and people experience it in different ways, but trauma is trauma based upon the person perceiving it, not anything else, okay? And so he was telling the story about how he wanted to make sure that he and his team were able to stay mission focused, even while dealing with trauma. And so he reached out to a good friend of his who is active military, and he asked him the question. He said, so how do you stay mission focused and deal with trauma? And his friend simply said, you don't. Like, really, you don't. Either you are mission focused or you're dealing with the trauma. Now, you may not be dealing with the trauma as the trauma has just unfolded. It may be just like people who come back from military, it may be 5 or 6 months, they're fine. And then 6 months or 7 months, and all of a sudden it's not okay. And so he goes on and he remembers this later in the summer. And he says in this interview, it's like July, August, he said, I was struggling. I was struggling in a big way. Okay. Back to my story. He didn't look good when I saw him during that time. Right. And he said, I was really struggling, but I wanted to find out what to do and what to do about it. And so he calls back his friend and he said, without telling him he was struggling, he said, so what are some of the symptoms that you yourself go through or you see when people are dealing with their trauma? And he says, well, first, his friend says, my sleep pattern gets off. He's like, for me personally, I stay up way too late. I never get up. I don't want to get up. And it's not just a day or two. It's like days and days and weeks and goes on, can be on for months. And Simon's like, check. He said the second thing for him, for this friend personally, was that he struggles. He can't focus and he can't get things done, and he kind of plays at work and he rationalizes why he can't get things done, but he just really struggles and doesn't stay focused. And Simon's like, check. And the third thing that he brings up is that he isolated himself. He isolates himself. He just kind of cocoons. He just doesn't go out with friends. He doesn't reach out, doesn't touch base with people. He just lives. And Simon's like, check. So I'm watching this video and I'm actually in a room of other CEOs and I am literally like, there's tears running down my face. And I'm doing this because he just described for me the last 4 months of my life. And I'm thinking, he just gave me permission not to be okay. By this time in January, I'm starting to be okay. But the previous 4 months, I was not okay. And I just remember thinking, I wish I would have told my staff, because they all thought something was really, really wrong, that the business was failing, that I wasn't doing okay, that our clients were not getting support. But I never reached out and said, hey, I'm not doing okay right now. I've been the strong person. I'm the leader. I'm the person who's supposed to hold the world up, like I'm Atlas. And since that time, I've told that story. It's countless times. And I'm talking to CEOs, and the number of people who need a tissue as we're telling that story is every time we talk about it. Every time, because people have just been tired of feeling like they're holding up the world, even if they don't have to. And so I'm hoping that today we can talk a little bit about how it's okay to say to somebody, I'm struggling. I'm not doing okay. I either need some time away, or I need to talk to somebody, or just let you know, give me a couple of weeks. I'm going to do my best, but it's not going to be the best. Right. And sometimes just knowing that somebody else is going through it lifts some of the weight or some of the burden off of you, because you're trying to create this image or this perception that you're okay. I'm like, nope, you're not. You got to work through the trauma. So that's my story. And I hope that the story helps somebody else, and that we can talk a little bit more about some of the things that we can do to help our coworkers and our clients and our friends be okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, and Robin, I want to ask you, this being your field of expertise, right? Andrea had mentioned a few symptoms. What are, for the folks on the webinar here, what are the things that you're looking for? That's like, hey, they're the little, we'll call them the symptoms. You don't know for sure what's going on, but there's something going on. What are those things that we can look for, whether it's in ourselves or it's around the people around us?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to address Andrea and just say thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I think that oftentimes people think that either A, if I'm sharing my story, I have to give details, or if I'm asking other people, we're going to get into details, and that scares me, and you don't. All you have to say is, I'm just not doing okay. And that's all it has to be. And it really does open up the door. So thank you. I'm on different platforms, one of which is the anti-stigma campaign here locally. And a piece of that is getting people of your stature and people in leadership positions to say those words. And it's really difficult for people. With that, looking internally and then also externally at others, what are some signs and symptoms? It's really difficult because it does vary so much from person to person. So I wish I could give you concrete answers. What would be my abnormal is different from what Andrea or Chris's abnormal behavior. People talk about isolation. That as a clinician has been one of the telling factors for years and years and years on, if you're talking about from a diagnosis standpoint. But then let's throw in, I don't know, the CDC has said to socially distance for the past year. And let's just note that it shouldn't have been called socially distance. It should have just been from the get-go saying physically distance, but keep people socially in your life. But I think that isolation thing has been a key thing for a lot of people. I'm an extrovert on the off the charts extrovert. So for me, if people who cared about me and knew me and even me assessing internally, I would know that would be one of my first signs, is if I had no desire being around or talking on the phone with my social supports. And they would know if I wasn't picking up the phone for a couple of days that would be a telltale sign. Now, if somebody that's just how they are, we talk about their temperament, that might not be a good indicator. So it really does vary from person to person, and it would be dependent on how long it lasts. Andrea had mentioned the sleep. So if it's lasting a long period of time and how much it's impeding on our daily living, those would be two things that I'd really talk about. So the pervasiveness and the severity are the two key factors that we tend to look at. So am I not sleeping so much that I'm not showing up at work? I'm trying to think of some other good examples. Am I isolating so much that I haven't talked to my mom in 3 weeks? So kind of talking about individual severity and the pervasiveness of it are really the telltale factors. And it does vary from person to person on what, somebody who is in crisis mode may never touch drugs or alcohol, where somebody else who's in crisis mode would. So sorry, I'd like to give you more concrete answers, but I do think those are the biggest things that we can count on is the severity of it, how much it impedes on our daily living, and how long it's lasting.
Okay, good. Well, and just, obviously the human factor, everything is different per person, right? What's normal for one is not at all for the other. With that, Chris, I want to kind of flip it over to you, because I know some of the things you've implemented, or, within some things that you were starting to implement. What are some things that you can share with the group, ways that you can engage or monitor, just kind of be in extra touch with the employees to have a little bit of a better pulse of how they're doing? What are some things that you guys have implemented in the past?
Well, kind of echoing what Robin said, people kind of react differently. So to list off maybe some symptoms is very hard. I think one of the things that we try and teach, especially supervisors, for us, the fire service kind of being a little bit different from a normal office where you're with people from 8 to 5. We live with our coworkers for 24 hours a day. So it might be a little bit easier to perhaps notice some changes in someone. So one thing we try to emphasize, especially to our supervisors, is look for somebody that's just not acting themselves. And you may not be able to put your finger on it, but you'll be able to say, hey, Bob's just not Bob, and we're not really sure what's going on with him. And I think the best way to kind of monitor and see where they're at is to just simply ask them. Create a safe environment where it's okay to talk about stuff, and then ask them, hey, what's going on? I've noticed that you haven't been yourself. You've been late a couple of times. You're not as enthusiastic during the day, during training, things that we're doing. what's going on? We're worried about you. Let's talk, and kind of get them off to the side where maybe they'll feel more comfortable to discuss what's going on. And just really creating that safe space and communicating with them. They may be waiting for somebody to notice that something's not quite right, and finally when they get somebody that pulls them aside and says, hey, what's going on? They take a sigh of relief and go, let me dump everything out on you right now and let you know what's going on because somebody finally asks. So I think communication is really important, knowing your people, getting to know the people who you're responsible for, their family, what things they like, their habits, their hobbies, really helps you to identify when there's been some change for some reason. And then asking them what's going on, and getting them to talk to you and kind of maybe relieve themselves of kind of the things that are weighing them down. And I think one thing that's really important that was alluded to earlier is being able to share information with somebody that you think is going to understand. It may be very difficult to go home to your family or your friends that are away from work and talk about the stress at the office or talk about the stress at work. I know for firefighters it is, because they know that people outside of the fire service just won't understand, what they experience. So it's probably easier for them to trust someone at work, trust someone who understands the stress that they've been going through. And it's easier for them to kind of unload kind of what's weighing them down. So yeah, communicating with people, I think it's the number one thing.
Michelle, can I add on to that?
Most definitely.
So a couple of things that both Chris and Robin brought up that I think are really important, but I want to add on to it. So with the CEOs that I talked to, I didn't go up to them and say, I'm noticing these weird things, right? These abnormal things. What I did is I told my story. And because I told my story, you could just see their shoulders droop like this. And it doesn't have to be a supervisor. It can be a friend. It can be a coworker. This is not, it's great if you can have supervisors that can notice those things, but human to human is what we're talking about here. And just simply saying, you know what, I'm really struggling and I've got kids at home and I know I feel like I need to be at work and doing my best. And I've got the technology is not working and right. And that person's like, I feel you, right? Like, okay. So, just asking, it's like, what are you doing? Just asking, like, what are you doing to help yourself? Maybe I can share myself, or maybe we can just start talking about it. But I think the vulnerability of a person sets the tone for the conversation, because it's really hard sometimes to hear, well, you're doing this weird and you're doing this weird and you're doing this weird. It's like, you just, sometimes it feels like you're adding on to my already feelings of inadequacy. And I think that we have to be mindful, and we're not unintentionally maybe doing that, but we have to be mindful that we're not adding more to the weight of what they're carrying, but just simply, let me carry it with you kind of thinking, if that makes sense.
Michelle, I want to add one other thing to Chris's point earlier. It's amazed me, and I don't know if you all, Andrea and Michelle, have heard this too, but with our employer workforces that are still predominantly remote, how many of them have picked up, and it all is built on this foundation of knowing your people, right? But how many people have picked up, even from a virtual standpoint, that people aren't doing well? And I just think that is so telling. That even from this interaction, I'm not sitting in front of you, but people think, wow, Robin doesn't seem herself. So I just think that that's really important, even from a virtual standpoint. If you're a great leader and you've set that foundation of trust and empathy and understanding, and you know your team well, you're going to pick up on those things.
Yes. And Robin, when everyone went remote, initially, right? That was one of the things that we did, was connect with our clients And it was, providing them with some tools and tips on how to use the different platforms, and really stressing the importance of staying connected to your people face to face. And we can't do it physically, right? So it's whatever platform you're using, there's lots of it, Teams, Zoom, and there's many more, right? But not just communicating via email or text or instant messaging, or even a phone. I mean, a phone, those are fine to move it, to balance in and out throughout your day when you're talking to your employees. But we really need to have some of those face-to-face. And so Robin, I know with you working with so many different organizations, I'm curious, with the remote, has there been anything that you've really just kind of hung your hat on? Like, these are when you're coaching organizations that have a lot of people that are in a remote situation, what are some of your key go-tos that you are helping them with as they are managing their people at a distance?
Well, I think a piece of that is providing some strategic communication strategies for them, because each organization is so unique. We have some that are 50-50 with remote. We have some that are, they get angry if you said that remote work, because they're like, we've been in person this entire time. And then you have some that are almost all remote still. So you have to tailor it a little bit differently per the organization and what their culture is. So I think providing that that one-on-one help, whether it's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, to do those check-ins and say, what can we do better? What do you need from us for resources from a mental health standpoint? And talking through some of those things. But some things that I've seen organizations do really, really well have been implementing like huddle meetings, whether they're on a daily basis or a weekly basis with their teams. That has helped immensely. And then one-on-one individual check-ins with each member of their team. I say at minimum on a weekly basis. It is hard because we work with some organizations where we have some people that supervise their team leads for 150 people. So that seems impossible to that person. But I think you can break that down. And a lot of times they have people in supervisory or lead roles that could help assist with that, who might know some of those frontline employees a little bit better than they do and get more of a touch point with them. So those are some things that we've seen work really well. I think also, to Andrea's point, from a professional standpoint, we've been told for years to not break that professional boundary. And a piece of that is not giving up some of that vulnerability. And I think with the onset of the pandemic, it's forced us into this box for a lot of people in leadership. A lot of people still need to grow in this area, but to offer up some of those key points of what they're struggling with, to help normalize it and help with that psychological safety of a culture. So I think, for so long we've been trained to not break those professional boundaries as leaders. So we have to work really, really hard and be intentional to provide that human element that we're all going through. And from a clinical perspective, I was always trained, from a patient to provider standpoint, to never disclose that kind of stuff, especially if it's in response to just build rapport, and to, you guys had alluded to not do harm. I'm not going to unload my stuff and put more burden on somebody else's shoulders. So I think there is a balance, and we can still be vulnerable and show our human side without giving away too much information. But I've seen a lot of great tactics that people have done. And what it comes down to, and no matter what capacity, with whether we're in a pandemic, whether remote, it all comes down to the foundational great leadership skills that, it takes to succeed.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Well, I want to kind of just reach out to the audience real quick. So everyone, just make sure you get your chat open. And in the chat, I want you to enter in, what is one thing that instantly boosts your mood when you're feeling stuck or down? So one thing that instantly boosts your mood, kind of like your go-to when you are feeling stuck or down. Sunshine, positive music. Yeah, nice weather, definitely. A walk's great. Seeing my children, oh, those are great. Chocolate, love it. Yeah, the walking outside, there is so much to be said about just getting out there. Yeah, coffee, caffeine, music, giggles, virtue, game nights. Oh, those are great. Ah, the dog. Thank you. I'm glad someone brought their animals into the whole thing. I mean, I can't imagine the last, 12 months without our pets. So they have been probably more amazing in 12 months than we ever really knew with everything. So FaceTime with friends. Good. Good. It's these are little things though, right? And it's looking for it's figuring out what's that little thing that just helps you. And having that awareness of I'm just kind of feeling like maybe I've just sat too much, or I need to do something, right? And then we always are talking about the importance of moving and hydrating, and getting that upbeat music, and whether it's just a 5 minute, real quick, 10 minute, whatever it may be, but just monitoring yourself and picking up on, I sometimes identify certain parts of the day where I just know I need to make sure I'm up and moving. Set your watch. If you've got a smartwatch, you can set it for every 45, 30 minutes or every hour, and cause yourself to get up and move, walk around your office, outside, whatever. So good. And I'm glad to see you guys put all those in there. Chris, I want to kind of bump back to you real quick. Because when we talk about, in the world that you live in, and unfortunately there was an incident yesterday out in Boulder, Colorado, that would be a situation that I would imagine people that you have worked with would always fear daily, right? Getting up and going to work, and what am I going to go into today, right? And that situation is something that I'm sure everyone in your profession and police and so forth all fear that call. What are the things when someone is struggling with their stress, but it's more stress because of the trauma? How do you help someone? How do you help someone after that incident yesterday? What things do you have in place that maybe are the first go-tos that can really help? And I know, thank goodness, most of us don't have to typically deal with this, but I think we can still take a lot of little things from it and really help just with day-to-days even. So
Right, and there's a balance to that. I think a lot of people get into my profession, whether it's fire, EMS, or law enforcement, a lot of times because of that reason, because they don't know what they're going to face each day. So it's something different every day. But on the same note, as you said, we don't know what we're going to face every day. So that causes stress in and of itself. You don't know if it's going to be a quiet day, or you don't know if you're going to be sent to a situation like they had in Boulder yesterday, or a multi-casualty, car accident or something like that. So I think there's a lot of preparation that needs to go in that to prepare. Number one, to prepare people for what they might face. And that's one of the strategies that we've talked about for a while too, when we get people that join the fire department in a recruit academy or during their orientation, to talk about some of the things that they may face in the profession, to kind of prepare them mentally, and then to talk about some strategies that they can use to alleviate some of that stress. And it may not be, like I mentioned before, it may not be one incident that really causes some stress for them, but it may just be the cumulative stress. I think somebody mentioned earlier about sleeping habits. Firefighters don't have good sleeping habits because we're working 24 hours a day, and you may be up all night. And then you go home the next day, and you have the kids, and you have chores at home and things like that. So we have that whole combination of the cumulative stress of running a bunch of calls during the day, seeing things that people normally don't see or don't want to see or are dealing with, and then making sure that we stay focused on that mission, like we talked about earlier. So I think having things in place and knowing that we're going to have incidents. Right here, just a couple of weeks ago, here in the county where I'm at now, there was a tornado that injured 10 people, and unfortunately there was 3 fatalities. And we sent a crew down there to assist in that. It was a large incident, and they saw a lot of catastrophic damage and things that people don't normally see. So when they came back the next shift, I made it a point to meet with them and talk about it and kind of talk about my experiences and how things like that have affected me in the past, and to give them an opportunity to simply talk about it, talk about what they saw to kind of get some of that out. Some of the other strategies that we can use to prepare people or prepare organizations is to, one thing we're doing now in the fire service is preparing people within our organization to talk to those that have experienced those traumatic incidents. And it's peer support team is what we call it. So we take firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics who don't have any training on how to counsel somebody, but we give them training to be able to know how to listen, how to support somebody, and then what do they need to do to find additional resources for that person and support them to get those additional resources if they need it, going to a mental health clinician or somebody that can help them. So we actually put together teams within fire departments and train those people on how to have those conversations, how to talk to people after a very traumatic incident. And then we try to recognize when they go, like going to that tornado or going to that very serious motor vehicle accident, or where they just simply have an incident that involves little kids. That's usually some of those triggers for our people that cause them a lot of stress. So we try to identify those types of incidents and then put that peer support team into action to meet up with those people. Just simply, it may be a case of where we just send a peer support team member out to that fire station and say, hey, go check on that crew. Just go ask them how they're doing and see what kind of support that they need. So I think it's putting things in place, having resources in place not in the fire service, but in a regular office, being able to have some of those resources that you can give to somebody, that you can refer somebody to, whether it's EAP or a clinician that you can refer them to, something that you have on hand to give them as far as resources, I think is really important. I guess being prepared is probably the most important thing to support people.
Well, and Chris, as you were talking, it just I was starting to think a little bit about, if you get into manufacturing environments, there can be an accident. Someone's not wearing the right PPE, and the next thing you know, something happens, right? So I really like that plan, in the sense of we're just going to be prepared and have a group of individuals that are, trained to listen, ask those questions, know when to provide the resources, have the resources, make sure they're updated, right? That it's all there. To me, what you were describing is kind of like life insurance. I mean, hopefully we don't have to use it, but if we do, we're ready, right? We have a little bit of a parachute, maybe is the way to put it. So yeah, that was, I could definitely see things that you talked about, how that could transition over into the workplace for sure. Andrea.
Well, a couple of things that, as we were talking about how this event had described a certain number of months in 2020 for me before 2021. A couple of things that we've done and that I've done personally. One is I had to get back into my affirmations. I had to reprogram. So your brain thinks things over and over and over again, and it creates a path in your brain. It's a neural pathway. And the more I think about something that's not working, the more it's not going to work, because I just keep thinking it over and over and over again. So I had to reprogram some of the things that weren't working for me. So, there were confidence affirmations, there were exercise affirmations, kind of health affirmations. But the other thing that we've done at Revela for years is we talk about, or we get people started thinking about things that give them the hormonal drip, the dopamine drip that happens. So it's like, what can I do to think of something that makes me happy? It's, instead of the first thing I do in the morning, I'm reaching for my phone and looking at what crap I have to take care of during the day, right? But instead, and I don't look at it, and I'm going to either wake up to a music that I really, really love, or I'm going to go through my my gratitude journal, or I'm going to do something that gives me something of joy that gets me started and gives me a little bit of a jump start for those times where I'm like, I just don't have it. I just don't have it in me. But if we can get some of those little things like, affirmations and things that give you joy and things that make you happy and things that you're grateful for, it feeds the chemicals in your body and in your brain to help you start moving things forward. And it works. I know it works. And I've seen it work for lots of people. So.
Andrew, to follow up with that, I heard a person one time describe it as, kind of thinking of your day as like, think of bookends. When you get up in the morning and then when you go to bed, what are the routines that you have that are really about you to help you be successful, to help you feel good, right? And they talked exactly at it. It's whether it's you get up, the first thing you do is stretch, meditate. But figuring out what are those routines. Same thing before bed. It's coming up with what are those 2 to 3 things that I do routinely every night, and it will help me really get a good night's sleep. And then practice those, and make them a habit, make them a routine, because they might not be one right now. But there's been I've recently heard it described as bookends, but in regards to what you were just talking about there as well. So Robin, I know you had placed in chat, so if someone didn't look in it, she had placed in their Stretch Minder app. Want to give us real quick, what does that do?
I have noticed this. Here we are a year into this pandemic, and I don't know about any of you, but I feel like I've sat more in the last year than I ever have. We'd always be out on the go, meeting with clients, and everything went virtual. So almost a year into it, I started researching apps, and I came across this one. And so I just downloaded it last week, and you can customize it to, how sedentary you are and what do you like to do, how often you'd like breaks. And so I just get notifications every so often. I think I have mine set to once an hour to get up and stretch and move, and it'll give you recommendations like go grab a coffee or whatever. And so if I'm in the middle of a meeting, I'll just make a mental note to make sure to do that when I'm done. So just something I recently did, should have done a year ago.
Yes. Well, yeah. And who knew we're going to be sitting this much, right?
Right.
Oh my goodness. That was definitely something I did not see coming at all. So no, that's a great little tool. Well, what I want us to do now, the little twist with the leadership hustle, is we want to go ahead and break into small groups. And in the small groups, you will have one of us 4, and then or Aaron or Sarah from Haram. And we want you to talk about 2 things. The one thing is, just from the discussions, what's something that you wrote down that you'll share with the group that maybe was important that you're like, oh, this could help. And then the other thing is, what have you recently, or maybe it was 6 months ago, but what have you implemented that would have a positive impact to improve employee morale and mental health in the workplace? Because we are, like, Robin, you said, we're 12 months into this. So I know there's a lot of organizations that have been very intentional about doing some things. And, when we pull the small groups together, I want everyone to just take a moment and, even if it was something that you think everyone else does that you started the last 12 months, share something that you're doing just a little different that is really intentional about improving that employee morale and mental health in the workplace. So, and one thing Courtney's done for us is she placed that question as well in chat. So she's actually going to be breaking us out into small groups. So we are going to be planning on coming back at 4:20. So we'll be in the small group just a little over 20 minutes. So everyone give, depending on how many people that we have in our small groups, give everyone an opportunity to chat. And then we will see everyone back here at 4:20. And if you can be prepared to share a shout out something that your group talked about. So each group have one person ready to share something that they took away. So it looks like we are all coming back. And just what I'd like to do is give a shout out, have each group. So hopefully you've picked someone, and I will be guilty because we did not pick someone. Everyone took a little bit of time and spoke, and they had some great things to say, and we didn't leave it with what was the best thing. But I can probably talk for the group unless someone else wants to. And so actually we can start with my group. If someone wants to kind of just speak up real quick, what was something that we talked about? And I know we had a couple Karens that stood out to you. And
Sorry, there we go.
there we go.
I think one thing that stood out to me was, while we may have thought that our company culture was great before, that we really need to take the time to reevaluate kind of where we're at, because things do look a lot different. I can't remember her name, but one of the girls that was in our group had said that, the majority of their associates are working from home now. Where I work, that's not what's happened. We have departments that have alternated working from home and coming into the office. But unfortunately, for the majority of our employees, that's not an option. They have to come into work, being a manufacturing facility. So really trying to figure out how to encourage them to still communicate and, remain close without physically being close has really been a challenge for us.
No, that's good. Thank you so much for hopping on. Erin, how about someone from your group?
Does somebody want to jump in? Otherwise, I'm happy to. Okay, well, we had some great discussion. The biggest thing I think I took away from it was there was the talk about being zoomed out. And, one gal mentioned that they started doing just a phone call, like a conference phone call, rather than always feeling like you have to show yourself. Just, you don't know what the person's day is looking like, if they're stressed out that day, if they're not comfortable with their background or what's in their home. And so kind of giving people a break from always being on with their screen on, and just doing a phone call so that they can just be more relaxed and not feel like somebody's always, they're always having to look at the screen or doing work on the side, etc. So I thought that was a kind of a fun idea. And then they also said, if they did do the screen, they would have like virtual fun days where they do like a Hawaiian day. So everybody picked like a virtual Hawaiian background, or they wore a lei that day for a meeting, just to kind of build morale and culture for that meeting.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really good. Really good. And I agree. It's easy to get zoomed out, right? And so blending in the phone is, I think I agree 100%, so valuable. Sarah, how about your group? What was something that you guys talked about that stood out?
We had some great conversations. We had one individual in particular, they set up quite a few challenges at their office. So whether that is standing, taking the stairs, walking, they also found out that their employees are pretty competitive, and that kept them kind of going and motivated. And I think those little things are what's helping a lot of people get through things like this. We've had goodie bags given out, making sure birthday cards are getting delivered to employees. Some of those little things that could have easily been forgot about during the middle of a pandemic, but making sure that we're following through on those things as we move forward.
Yeah, again, the little things are so important. So important. All right. Chris, how about your group? What was something that stood out during those conversations?
Yeah, we had a really good discussion. We talked a lot about things that people were doing out there to kind of boost morale, kind of bring people together, even if it was virtually. One really neat thing somebody mentioned they did was a trivia night. They brought everybody together after work, and they had a trivia night. They kind of described how they were doing it, and that was something I wouldn't have even thought about. But we also talked about making sure that we maintain that environment where people can stay motivated, optimistic, and then that kind of hinges a lot on communications and making sure that the leadership and everybody is kind of ensuring that people know what's going on, and then tying back and reminding them why we're here. What's our mission? Remember the vision. This is where we're going, and everybody is helping us get along to that point. We also did a little bit of talking about some other issues like businesses having to pivot because of the pandemic, and the fact that we can no longer meet face to face with people, and now we have to do it virtually, or we have to change the way that our business operates now. And that the most successful businesses were able to do that because they were focused on what their mission is and why they're here. And it didn't matter how they did business physically, but it mattered that they were able to maintain their connection with their mission and continue to operate. So that's some really good discussions.
Yeah, no, I really like how you guys were talking about the pivoting, but more importantly, the focus, that clarity in the message of where we're going and why we exist, right? And
Yeah.
having that be that foundation that really drives our actions, no matter where we're at. We just have to kind of figure out what we have to do is a little different so we can still accomplish that. And that's a huge piece of our communication strategy within the organizations, and how good of a job are we doing at it. So good. That sounds like that was really good discussions. Robin, how about your group?
Yeah, I had Carrie and Emily in my group. So ladies, if I miss anything, please chime in. We had some good discussion as well. Carrie had mentioned, at least initially in the pandemic, being flexible with employees as far as where they conduct their work, and if that meant moving remotely for those that could, pivoting for that. Then we also talked about as people are returning, highlighting those safety protocols to help with reassurance and for employees' fears and anxieties related to returning to a work environment. Emergency paid sick leave, even though there wasn't a lot of government funding for them, still offering emergency paid sick leave. EAP got mentioned in my group, and I didn't even bring it up, but new employee orientation was a big thing. And, for those new hires and even for those tenured employees, remembering to talk about EAP in those moments, safeguarding confidentiality related to EAP, and remembering that that's usually one of the main reasons why people don't utilize that service is they think that it's not confidential when it is. And then lastly, we talked about critical incident response, whatever entity you use for your EAP or mental health services and resources, having a clinician available, whether it's an employee death. We've even had requests for, as people go back to returning to a workplace, having a counselor available to help with some of those fears and anxieties. So the importance of really taking some of that weight off HR folks' shoulders and leaning to experts in the community that can help you with some of those things is really important, in providing a really timely critical incident response when those things do happen.
Oh yeah, I'm glad they brought that up. Well, and you made me think. I was with the group brainstorming, and that whole return to work, for those that haven't officially pulled in or brought back everyone, you might have pods, some people, but not all. It's been a year. I mean, if they've been working from home, they have their new habits, and they have people or animals that they care about that rely on them, and really being considerate of timing and giving them enough notice where they can start planning and get everything in place that they need to get in place, and maybe stagger it where it's a gradual where they come back, but looking for what can we do to help reduce that stress of when we return to work, or even are we going to return to work? I don't know if we're going to return to work. That uncertainty can be stressful too. So just kind of thinking about how are we going to be our best at bringing the people back to, if you're at that situation, to reduce stress, not increase stress. So, Andrea, what was something from your group?
Amanda's got it.
I was volunteered. So we talked quite a bit about what we're doing and what we can do to help, especially with morale and mental health. A couple things that were brought up was making sure the people in the office are taken care of a little bit more than the people at home, doing a little extra for them, but also making sure you're including the people at home just with something different. Doing like box lunches for the people in the office, but sending gift cards to the people at home. My company, we did a socially distanced picnic last year when it was nice enough. We had some people show up, but we had quite a few that felt uncomfortable. I think this year it might be a little different. We also talked about making sure supervisors and managers are checking in with employees. And one thing we did was we actually sent out a survey to our employees to make sure, kind of get their input on if we were doing it correctly, were we giving enough communication or not checking in enough. And that really helped our supervisors see what they needed to do for their employees. And then we also started doing CEO emails and emails from the executive team. They went out to everyone. It was just on different topics. It started off more on how we're handling the pandemic, but then we kind of it's been a while, we haven't been able to come up with more emails, so it turns into fun things you can do outside or just different events going on in the community.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great discussion as well. Really good. Well, and you know, we are strong believers in really, you know, getting to know the people around us in our community and what are they doing that's helping their people and helping themselves, and how do we teach each other and how do we learn from each other. So we were excited to have this opportunity to pull a group together and share some insights from some experts on the panel, but then also be able to break out and have some of the discussions with what are some of the people doing in the groups themselves. So we are, you know, really going to wrap up for today. We will have, just kind of like a little reminder, we will have an email go out tomorrow, which will include the link to the video. So if there's someone that you want to share with or whatever it may be, it's out there, and so are our previous ones. We will also have in the chat and in the email as well that goes out, we will have save the date for our next human resource leadership hustle human resources, and that's going to be June 29th, and it's going to be the same time, 3 p.m. and the same format. And we are right now in the process of identifying a topic, because we believe as we move out in the future, we want to stay on top of what's the hottest thing right now. And if we were to forecast what was going to be hot, we wouldn't be right. So instead of taking that risk, we're just gonna start working on. Actually, that's one of our assignments for this next couple of weeks, is to start evaluating. So if there's anything that you're like, this is on my hot plate, I want to have a discussion that's really valuable, shoot me an email. It's michelle@revelagroup.com. And if I can get some feedback from the audience, that would be great. The other thing we're going to be doing as another shout out is one thing we do, we work closely with family owned businesses, and we've got a leadership hustle that is going to take place on May 27th. And that is focusing on family businesses. So anyone that is working in a family business or owns a family business, that could be something of value as well. We'll have that information out on our resource page and so forth as well here in the, actually we just launched it. So actually, as I correct myself, Courtney will probably have a link to Eventbrite for that one that's going to be coming up as well. And then we'll also have information to the different partnership that we've done with Haram, and that link will take you out to information. So in 2021, some things that we've recently pulled together with them that are of services for individuals that are members of Haram. That will be available in the email as well. So I want to thank our panel. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and make sure to keep an eye out for June 29th. And we look forward to visiting with everyone in a few months. Everyone enjoy your evening. Be safe. Thank you.